ever get that feeling. Like you want to just dive deep into the big questions, really think about things like reality, how we should live, almost like trying to be a philosopher for a bit.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But then, like, the thought of actually reading all those super dense philosophy books, it's kind of a buzzkill.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's what we're doing today. We're going deep, deep into a time in Chinese history when thinkers were doing exactly that, wrestling with those big philosophical questions, trying to figure out the world and our place in it.
Yeah, they were like philosophers of their time, and not just a few people here and there.
Right.
This was a whole movement. We're talking Song-Ming Confucianism,
Yeah.
roughly 10th to 17th century China.
Wow.
And it was huge, maybe the second most important time for Confucian thought after, well, Confucius himself.
So basically, they were taking those classic Confucian ideas and really building them into, like, full-blown systems, right?
Exactly. Coherent worldviews rooted in the Confucian tradition, but going way beyond just preserving what was already there.
And to help us navigate all this, we're using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry on Song-Ming Confucianism.
It's really good, a great overview of a really complex period.
Our shortcut, basically.
Right.
So what we're trying to do today is pull out those key insights, those big debates they were having, and see how they approach these fundamental philosophical questions.
How they did philosophy in their own way.
Right, exactly. So, like, what were the tools in their philosophical toolkit?
Exactly. Like, how did they try to understand the cosmos, the universe? What did they think about human nature, good and bad, all that? And how did they deal with the relationship between, like, our inner thoughts and feelings and those big ethical principles?
Yeah, that's always a tough one.
For sure. And really importantly, what were their methods for, actually becoming better people, more virtuous? That was the core of their whole philosophy.
The whole self-cultivation thing.
Yep. And we'll even touch on how they applied all this to, like, good governance.
So if you love those aha moments, figuring out big ideas without getting lost in the weeds, or if you're just curious about how different traditions tackled these big questions.
You're in the right place.
Totally. Okay, so these Song-Ming Confucians were doing some seriously heavy philosophical lifting.
Yeah.
But, like, where did all this come from? What was the context for all this philosophical activity?
Well, to really get it, you got to look at the historical situation. So by the Song dynasty, Buddhism had become a major force in China, intellectually and spiritually.
Right. Huge influence.
So what called Neo-Confucianism, it kind of came about as a way to revive Confucian values, after Buddhism had become so prominent.
Like a pushback, almost.
In a way, yeah. Though Neo-Confucianism, it's a term that can be used kind of broadly.
Okay.
Like sometimes it means any thinker from the Tang dynasty on who was trying to renew Confucianism.
Makes sense.
But more specifically, it usually refers to a group of thinkers in the 11th century, really important figures like the Chang brothers.
Right, they were huge.
They laid the groundwork for a lot of what happened philosophically in the Song and Ming dynasties.
So it was a deliberate effort, like, hey, let's bring Confucianism back to center stage.
Yeah, they were doing it in dialogue, sometimes directly, sometimes not, with these other big traditions. Buddhism, Taoism.
Right, couldn't ignore those.
Definitely not.
So if they were acting as philosophers and kind of positioning themselves against these other schools of thought, what were some of the specific things they disagreed on? Where were the big clashes?
Okay, so one big critique they had was about this idea of selfishness. See. They thought Buddhists and Taoists, with all their emphasis on personal liberation from suffering, were ultimately focused on personal gain, lie. That's a different character, by the way, not the lie meaning principle we talked about earlier. This one's about personal benefit.
Okay, two different lists. Got it.
Right? So they saw this focus on personal liberation as a kind of normative egoism, putting your own well-being above everything else. And they felt this inward focus came at the expense of the world, especially ethical behavior and relationships, the social stuff that was at the heart of Confucianism.
But didn't Buddhists also care about helping others? Like with the bodhisattva ideal, putting off your own enlightenment to help everyone.
Oh, absolutely. And the Neo-Confucians knew about those aspects of Buddhist thought. But their critique was more about the motivation behind it all and how realistic that path was for most people.
Okay, interesting.
Like, they thought the Buddhist path to caring for others was a lot more demanding and maybe not so relevant to everyday ethical choices within families and communities, which was the Confucian focus. They also, like philosophically, they were worried that if ethical behavior was only justified because it helped your own personal salvation, it could mess up the whole idea of goodness,
Right, like maybe you're not really acting good if it's all about you in the end. Interesting. So, not that Buddhists couldn't be good, but more about the core principles and the most effective way to live ethically. What about Taoism? What were the big criticisms there?
Similar themes, like Taoism is all about withdrawing from the world,
Yeah.
right? Finding harmony with nature through non-action.
Right, going with the flow.
Yeah, but the Confucians were all about actively engaging with society public service as a duty, so they saw that withdrawal as a kind of abandoning your responsibilities.
Interesting.
And philosophically, they also thought Taoists and Buddhists, too, were kind of simplistic about desires and emotions. Like, meditation wasn't enough to really cultivate virtue. You needed study, reflection on the classics, actively cultivating reverence for ethical principles in your daily life. And on a deeper level, they had problems with the Buddhist idea of emptiness, Kong.
Right, that was a big one.
They thought it meant the world was just an illusion, not really valuable, which undermined the Confucian commitment to, making a good society here and now.
Okay, so there was definitely a sense of competition, trying to show that Confucianism was the better, more relevant worldview. But I noticed that the source also mentions how the Neo-Confucians actually adopted some ideas and vocabulary from Buddhism and Taoism.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that kind of paradoxical?
Seems like it, right?
Like they're trying so hard to be different.
It shows you how philosophy works, though.
How so?
Well, you wrestle with other ideas, you critique them, you try to come up with alternatives, but you can't help but be influenced.
Makes sense.
Like, take this idea of the innate goodness of human nature, Sing-Shan. The Neo-Confucians definitely drew on Mencius, but his view was more about potential for goodness or capacity to develop virtue.
Okay.
But the Buddhist idea of Buddha nature, foxing, saying that all beings have this perfect potential just waiting to be uncovered, that's a closer parallel.
Interesting.
They even use similar metaphors, like a pearl hidden in mud or a mirror needing to be polished to show this idea of our goodness being blocked by bad influences.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty direct borrowing. Any other examples?
Oh, yeah. Lie, the metaphysical concept meaning pattern or principle.
Mm-hmm.
Different from that selfish lie we talked about earlier.
Right, keeping those separate.
It wasn't that big in the original Confucian texts, but it was central to Buddhist metaphysics, sometimes meaning emptiness.
Okay.
So Neo-Confucians took that term, lie, but gave it their own spin. For them, it described the order and principles behind the constant creation of life in the universe, Sheng, Sheng, Shengbu.
Okay.
It's the pattern behind everything, seasons changing, living things growing, all of it. And they're also way more into things like meditation and self-discipline, which were big in Buddhism and Taoism, but they used those practices differently, with a different understanding of what they were for.
So a complicated relationship, but fascinating.
For sure. Competition, critique, but also borrowing and reinterpreting.
Okay, so we've got the historical and intellectual scene set. Now let's get into some of those core ideas that really made Song-Ming Confucianism its own thing. The outline mentions Li, principle, and Qi. What are those all about? Why were they so important?
That takes us right to their metaphysics, how they understood reality. Most Confucians back then thought the world we experience, all the tangible stuff, is made of Qi. Think of it as this vital, energetic, material stuff.
Wow.
Like the basic building block of everything, always moving, transforming.
Okay, so Qi is like the fundamental energy stuff of the universe. So then what's Li? Why add another concept on top of Qi?
Well, a lot of these thinkers, they were philosophers trying to explain things completely, and they felt like Qi alone, with all its constant change, it couldn't fully account for the order, the unity, the inherent goodness they saw in the world.
Mm-hmm.
They saw patterns in nature, right? The seasons, how plants grow, how animals instinctively behave, even the way kids just naturally love their parents. They figured you needed something else, a principle, lei, to explain this underlying structure, this coherence that Qi by itself couldn't really provide.
So Lai is like the reason behind the patterns.
Exactly. It's the underlying principle that explains why things are the way they are and act the way they do.
Can you give me some concrete examples? How do they use Lai to explain the world?
Sure. Like they'd say lie is why boats float and carts roll.
Mm-hmm.
It's the principle governing how they function based on their form and how they interact with other Qi.
Okay.
It's why children naturally love their parents. It's the lie of familial connection. It's even behind the whole interplay of yin and yang.
Oh, wow.
And lie wasn't just descriptive, just explaining how things are.
Right.
It was also normative, meaning it had implications for ethics. Like the fact that children naturally love their parents. That was seen as a reflection of the lie of family relationships, which also meant it was morally right to be filial, to respect your parents.
Yeah.
So like kind of link the natural order and the moral order together.
It connected how things are to how they should be.
Exactly.
Powerful stuff. But did everyone agree about lie? Were there any, like, dissenting voices?
Oh, sure. You always have different philosophical opinions.
Right.
Like there were thinkers like Zhang Zai, Wang Tingxiang, later Wang Fuzi, who thought qi itself was powerful enough to explain the order and even virtue in the world. They didn't need this separate lie.
Okay, interesting.
And they had arguments for it, tried to show how the features and tendencies of qi in its different forms could create order and virtue.
What about Zhu Xi? He was a major figure, right? What was his take on all this?
Oh yeah, Zhu Xi's view became super influential, almost the standard view for a lot of people. He said lie was prior to qi, not like chronologically though.
Okay.
He meant ontologically prior.
Ontologically.
Like think of a recipe and ingredients.
Okay.
The recipe isn't made of the ingredients, and it doesn't exist before them in time, but it determines what they become, how they're organized.
Right, like you need the recipe to make the cake, even though the recipe isn't the cake itself.
Exactly. So Zhu Xi saw Li as that fundamental principle that gives form and direction to the energy of qi. He even called Li the master of qi. Not like it controls qi directly, but it sets the rules, the patterns that qi follows naturally.
So Li is the blueprint, and qi is the energy that makes it real. Okay, I think I'm getting that. Now, what about human nature? The outline mentions Li and Xing, which is human nature. How did they connect those ideas?
Human nature, Sujing, had been a big debate in Confucianism for a long time, way before the Song dynasty.
Right, Mencius versus Zunzi.
Exactly. Meiji saying we're good, Suzi saying we're selfish. But by the Song-Ming period, pretty much everyone agreed that human nature is good.
Okay.
And that was largely because of Cheng Yi, a really influential thinker. He connected Ixing to Li. He said that humans are good because we have Lai. Remember, Lai is all about life, growth, harmony.
Right.
It's universal.
Right.
And since humans have Lai, our nature must be good too.
Okay, but if we're all inherently good because of Lai, why is there so much bad stuff happening, so much immorality? That seems like a big problem for their theory.
Oh yeah, definitely. They had to figure that out.
Yeah.
Cheng Yi's solution was to say, we have a second nature too. What he called the material nature, Kijiji.
Okay, a second nature?
The second nature comes from our individual qi, that energy stuff we talked about.
Right.
So our fundamental nature, connected to Lai, that's good, no problem.
Okay.
But our material nature, shaped by the specific qi we get at birth, that can be messed up, clouded. It can block our goodness from coming out. That's what explains bad behavior and why some people seem better than others.
So it's like our qi is a filter, distorting our original good nature, stopping Lai from shining through.
Yeah, like a mirror that's covered in dust. It's still a mirror, it should reflect perfectly, but the dust is in the way.
Makes sense. And Zhu Xi, he tweaked this idea, right?
He did. He was all about creating a super coherent system, so he refined that distinction. Cheng Yi was talking about two separate natures, but Zhu Xi said it's more like one nature with two aspects.
Okay.
The pure ideal nature connected to Li, and then the embodied material nature affected by qi.
So still one fundamental human nature, just understood in two ways. Subtle, but important.
Very important. Keeps the whole system consistent.
Okay, now the last big concept. Li and Ixin, the heart-mind. What's the connection they saw between this principle, Li, and our subjective experience?
The descend, the heart, mind, that's where our thoughts, emotions, intentions, all that stuff happens. And it directs our actions.
Right, like the control center.
Exactly. And the Song-Ming Confucians, they were very practical, so they wanted to understand how Kixin relates to Li, to ethical norms.
Because if ethics are just some abstract thing disconnected from how we actually experience the world.
Yeah, it's hard to live by them. So one big idea was this wholeheartedness criterion for virtue. A truly virtuous person doesn't just do good things outwardly.
Right.
They really internalize those virtues, embrace them fully in their imbuement. No conflict, no hypocrisy, no hesitation.
Complete sincerity.
Exactly, Cheng. It's about a deep connection between our inner state and how we embody ethical principles in our lives.
Okay, so how did they connect lie and sin? How did principle get inside our heart minds?
Some big thinkers, like Liu Xiangshan and Wang Yangming, they went pretty far. They said sin isn't just connected to lie, it actually makes up lie.
Wow.
Like, the principles of order and virtue, they weren't external things you learned from books or observing the cosmos.
Okay.
They were already inside us, in our heart minds, that made ethics feel more accessible, more intuitive, more grounded in our own experience.
But isn't that a bit dangerous? If everyone defines their own ethics, wouldn't that lead to chaos?
Yeah, that was a worry for some people, the subjectivism problem. Like Cheng Yi, he insisted that Confucian ethics were based on heaven, Tian, this objective cosmic order, not just our personal feelings. And Zhu Xi, he made a distinction between the heart mind of the way, Daoxin, which is naturally aligns with leaves, and the human heart mind, Rangxin, which can be messed up by selfish stuff.
Okay, so two kinds of heart-mind.
Basically, yeah. He emphasized that lie exists independently, objectively. It's a standard for judging our own thoughts and feelings. So the Luang school, they stressed the connection between Zhu and Li, while the Chengzu school emphasized the objective foundation of ethics in the cosmic order.
Okay, so we've explored the big metaphysical and ethical ideas. Now, how do they think we should actually cultivate ourselves, become better people? They were all about self-cultivation, right?
Absolutely central to their whole philosophy.
Right.
For them, philosophy wasn't just abstract thinking.
Right.
It was about transforming yourself, becoming more virtuous. All those discussions about Li, Ji, Zhu, it was all about figuring out how to actually live better.
Okay, so let's start with knowledge. How important was learning and understanding in their approach to self-cultivation?
Well, being Confucians, they obviously valued learning. The classics like the Analects, the Mencius, those were essential reading. But even then, there was debate about how essential studying texts really was for moral development.
Okay, so some disagreement even there.
Yeah, like some, particularly in the Luang school, thought that cultivating your own intuitions, reflecting on your experiences, that was enough.
Interesting.
They thought too much book knowledge could be abstract, not really sinking in and guiding your actions.
Okay, so what was the counter-argument? Why did some insist on studying the classics?
Thinkers like Zhu Xi, they were worried about relying just on intuition, thought it could be unreliable, easily swayed by bias and emotions.
Makes sense.
So for them, studying the classics was a way to correct your own potentially flawed perspective, learn from the wisdom of the sages, the people who had already achieved great moral understanding.
Like tapping into that ancient wisdom.
Exactly. The outline also mentions this Mencian idea of extension, Tui.
Right, what's that about?
So Mencius, he talked about how we have these innate moral feelings, like you see a kid about to fall into a well, you naturally feel alarm, you want to help.
Right, instinctive.
He said the key to ethical knowledge is to take those basic moral judgments, those gut feelings in clear situations, and extend them to new, more complicated situations.
Okay.
See the similarities, the principles at play, and Song-Ming Confucians, they loved this idea.
So it's about applying those core intuitions more broadly.
Yeah, and Zhu Xi, he took it further. He said, it's not just recognizing similarities, but also understanding why the rules are important, how they fit into a system that creates harmony and flourishing.
Like not just knowing the rule, but understanding its deeper purpose.
Exactly. He called it discerning the reasons why it is so, Sui in Ranjigu. It's about going beyond just knowing to a deeper understanding of the moral order.
Okay, that makes sense. And they also had different categories of knowledge, right?
Right. Like ordinary knowledge, Chengzi, that's just knowing facts or how to do something, okay? And then there's genuine knowledge, Senji. That's deeper, more personal. It involves feelings, motivations, a commitment to acting on what you know.
Okay, so a difference between knowing something and really truly understanding it.
Yeah, and Cheng Yi, he had this great analogy with the tiger.
A tiger.
Yeah, imagine some villagers. Some have been attacked by a tiger. They really know the danger in their gut.
Right, first-hand experience.
Others have only heard stories. Their knowledge is less real, less powerful.
That's a good analogy.
And Wei Yangming, he built on this with his idea of the unity of knowledge and action. True knowledge has to lead to action. If you really know something's right, you'll do it.
Interesting. And what about that distinction between sensory knowledge and knowledge of our virtuous nature?
That's a big one, especially in Doxu, the learning of the way.
Okay.
Sensory knowledge, wenjin, jin, jin, ji, that's what we get through our senses, seeing, hearing, all that. But knowledge of our virtuous nature, dexing zizi, that's a deeper understanding of our inherent goodness, the lie within us.
Okay, so one is about the world outside, the other is about our inner moral core.
Yeah, like Zhang Zai, he said sensory knowledge always involves separation, the knower and the known, but knowing our virtuous nature is about unity, becoming one with what you know. The Chang brothers, they took it even further. They downplayed the importance of sensory experience or learning for knowing our good nature, though they still valued studying the world. Some of their followers were even more extreme, saying, we can know this stuff just through introspection. But Zhu, he was more careful. He didn't draw such a sharp line. He thought the most important knowledge was realizing our good nature. But external study, investigating principles, Geuzizi, was still important for getting there.
So, lots of nuances in how they understood knowledge. Now, what about mental discipline? The outline mentions Buddhism being an influence here. How did they incorporate that into their philosophy?
So they were definitely influenced by Buddhist ideas about the mind. All the stuff that gets in the way of clear judgment and moral action, like desires, attachments, negative emotions.
Right.
They saw how powerful those subtle, selfish inclinations, side, could be. So they developed all these techniques and approaches for mental discipline, for getting control over yourself.
Okay, like what? What did they actually do?
One thing was about catching and getting rid of selfish thoughts and desires early on. They called it overcoming the self, Kiji. They stressed paying attention to those first moments when emotions arise, that incipience, DG, before they take over.
Interesting.
Like Wang Yangming, he was all about constant vigilance, constantly weeding out any selfish desire to keep your sins pure.
Intense.
But Zhuji, while he agreed about overcoming selfishness, he also emphasized reverential attention, Jean.
Okay, what's that?
It's about being super focused and respectful in everything you do. He thought cultivating that would naturally weaken selfish impulses, like if your mind is healthy, you don't need as much medication to fix it.
Okay, interesting analogy.
And what about meditation? Did that become part of Confucian self-cultivation, with the Buddhist influence?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, they did practice quiet sitting, Jingzhou. But some of the Doxu tradition, like Yangshi, thought you could directly experience your true nature, the lie within, in that state of quiet.
Okay.
But Zhu Xi, always careful, he pushed back on that. He thought our nature is expressed through action, engagement with the world, not just sitting there passively.
Makes sense.
But he still saw quiet sitting as helpful, good for focus, reducing distractions, especially for people who had trouble calming their minds.
So meditation was more of a support, not the main thing.
Yeah, that's how he saw it. You mentioned Zhu Xi's focus on reverential attention, Jing.
Right. What exactly did he mean by that?
Jing was a big deal for him. It's about unwavering attentiveness to whatever you're doing and a deep respect and humility in everything.
Okay.
He thought it helped you keep your ego in check, restrain desires, be clear-headed, and ready to act morally. And it wasn't just about being still. It was about cultivating Jing in everything, even mundane stuff. He even recommended it for reading, approaching those texts with an open, focused mind.
So mental discipline for them was a two-pronged thing, actively fighting bad tendencies and cultivating a focused, respectful state of mind. Now, what about virtue itself? What were the key virtues, and how did they relate back to their philosophy?
The Song-Ming Confucians, they were all about virtues related to relationships.
Right, very much focused on how we treat each other.
They saw that as a core difference between them and, say, Taoists and Buddhists, who were more individualistic. They really emphasized the 5 constant virtues, the wuxia.
Okay, remind me what those are again.
So you've got humaneness, Ren.
Yeah.
That's like benevolence, compassion, caring about the well-being of others.
Okay.
Then righteousness, yi, doing what's right, being principled, even when it's tough.
Got it.
Ritual propriety, the wujie, it's a different character. This one's about social customs, etiquette, acting appropriately in all situations. Wisdom, qi, good judgment, understanding moral principles, knowing how to apply those other virtues in the right way.
Makes sense.
And finally, faithfulness, being trustworthy, keeping your word, the basis of good relationships and social order.
Those are the classic Confucian virtues, right? And they weren't seen as separate things, were they?
No, definitely not. They emphasized how they all work together. Like, you can't really be humane, Ren, without wisdom, Zi, to know how to help people effectively.
Right.
We also talked about Ren in this deeper way as harmonizing with the cosmic principle of life-giving, Sheng Bu Aya.
Okay.
So your actions should ultimately contribute to the flourishing of everything, the whole interconnected web of life. Zhu Ji even said all the virtues derive their purpose from contributing to this life-giving principle.
So it all ties back to that core idea of lei. Now let's shift gears to governance. How did their philosophy influence their ideas about how society should be run?
Confucianism had always been tied to government in China. Mastering the Confucian texts, that was the path to the civil service exams, to positions of power.
Right.
And the Song-Ming Confucians, they felt this dual obligation. Loyalty to the ruler, but also a responsibility to give ethical guidance, make sure the government was just and good for the people.
So they were like the moral conscience of the state.
Exactly. Giving ethical advice to the ruler, that was seen as the highest form of loyalty because it led to good governance, harmony, stability.
But there were also times when they got disillusioned with the government,
Well,
right?
yeah, definitely. When things were bad, some started looking for different models of governance.
Like that debate about commanderies versus fiefdoms.
Right, that was about how to organize regional governments.
Yeah.
The commandery system, Zhengxian, that's centralized.
Yeah.
Governors are appointed by the central government based on merit, usually based on those exams, and they rotate regularly.
Okay.
But in Fengjin, that's more old school. It's about granting hereditary rule over regions, often based on family ties.
Interesting.
And some in the Song-Ming period wanted to go back to something like enforcement. They thought it would make local rulers more responsible, create stronger local power bases, foster closer relationships between rulers and people, maybe even lead to more equitable land distribution like the old well-field system.
So a trade-off between efficiency and stability, centralization versus local control.
Yeah, exactly. And then there was the bigger question of institutional versus character-centered theories of governance.
What was that about?
That's a classic debate. How important are good laws and institutions, fa, versus the virtue of the people in power, ren? Like in the Zunzi, there's a big emphasis on rules, institutions, to control our selfish nature. Zunzi even said there are people who create order, but no rules that create order, meaning institutions are more important than individuals.
Okay, interesting.
But in the Song-Ming period, especially after the northern Song fell apart, a lot of thinkers, like Zhu Ji, leaned toward a character-centered view. They saw how easily corrupt officials could undermine even the best institutions.
Right.
So they thought real improvement had to come from cultivating virtue in leaders.
Okay, but weren't there also people who pushed for institutional reforms?
Oh, definitely. Like the Yongjia Confucians, Chen Liang and Ye Shi, and later Huang Zhanji.
Right.
They argued that good institutions could encourage good behavior and limit the harm from bad leaders. Huang Zhanji even had some pretty radical ideas, like giving ministers more power to check the emperor, allowing people to criticize the government. So even within Confucianism, there was debate about the right balance between laws and virtue.
Makes sense. Different approaches to the same goal. Okay, to wrap things up, what about the legacy of Song-Ming Confucianism? It's still relevant today, right?
Oh yeah, huge influence. It got some criticism later on, especially during the Qing dynasty when evidential studies became big.
Right.
But Song-Ming Confucianism, especially Zhu Xi and Wang Yangming, their impact is still felt all over East Asia.
In what way?
Well, Zhu Xi's interpretations of the classics, they became the official orthodoxy, the basis of the civil service exams for centuries. That shaped education and thought for millions of people.
Wow.
And even today, his commentaries are still important. And Wang Yangming's learning of heart-mind, with its focus on intuition and the unity of knowledge and action, that's still a major intellectual force.
Interesting.
And it's not just academics either. Their ideas shaped cultural values, education, even politics. The depth and the systematic thinking they brought to Confucianism, that's why this period is so important.
So just to recap, we've seen how these Song-Ming Confucians were real philosophers, engaging with other traditions, building their own systems, explaining human nature, developing practices for self-cultivation, figuring out virtue, debating about governance. It's been a pretty amazing journey.
It has, and hopefully you've gotten a good grasp of these complex ideas without feeling overwhelmed. We tried to highlight those aha moments where you see how it all fits together, the coherence of their thought.
Right, those moments of insight. So as you go on learning, maybe even putting on your own philosopher hat sometimes, think about this. What can we learn from how those Song-Ming Confucians tried to bring together different ideas, build their own worldviews, grapple with these fundamental questions? What do their debates about inner virtue and the ideal society tell us about our own challenges today? Lots to think about.
For sure.